Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Adapting a book for the screen is far more challenging than it seems. The director's main goal is to capture the spirit of the story without losing its important details. But while a book can stretch over 400–800 pages, a movie has only 2, maybe 3 hours, so screenwriters often have to sacrifice entire plot lines. That's why the Harry Potter films, despite their popularity, left out many moments that make some scenes appear confusing or illogical. Today, I'll tell you which details from the books never made it to the screen, yet completely change how we perceive the story. Enjoy watching. Number 1. How the Weasleys opened their shop. Half-Blood Prince. In the 6th film, we see Fred and George Weasley open their joke shop in Diagon Alley. For many viewers, this came as a surprise. The Weasley family was never wealthy. The answer lies in the Goblet of Fire. After winning 1,000 galleons in the Triwizard Tournament, Harry didn't want to keep the money. Instead, he gave it to the twins, saying, "Use it to make your dream come true." And that's how Weasley's Wizard Wheezes was born. Number 2. The Fate of Barty Crouch Jr. Goblet of Fire. The film's ending shocked audiences. All year long, Mad-Eye Moody had been Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, but after the reveal, silence. Where did he go? Why didn't the Ministry use his testimony to prove Voldemort's return? The book gives a darker explanation. When Minister Fudge arrived for questioning, the Dementor accompanying him acted on its own and sucked out Barty's soul, turning him into a useless witness. That's why the Ministry continued to deny the Dark Lord's return. Number 3. Why Harry didn't ask adults for help. Order of the Phoenix. When Harry had a vision of Sirius trapped in the Department of Mysteries, he tried to warn Snape by calling Sirius Padfoot. But since the films never mentioned that nickname, the clue might have seemed meaningless to viewers. Then everything happens too fast. The friends run away from school and head straight to the Ministry without trying to contact the Order. In the book, however, Harry checked the fireplace in Sirius's house, but Kreacher lied, claiming that his master wasn't there. Exactly what Voldemort had planned. Number 4. Why Dumbledore didn't defend himself from Draco, Half-Blood Prince. When Dumbledore and Harry return from the cave, Malfoy attacks them. In the film, it looks like the headmaster simply stands there and lets himself be disarmed. Quite illogical for the greatest wizard of his time. In the book, Dumbledore sacrifices himself to save Harry. He paralyzes the boy under the invisibility cloak just as Draco raises his wand. The spell hits the spot where Harry is hiding, leaving the headmaster defenseless. Number 5. How Ginny knew about the diary, Chamber of Secrets. After Harry found Tom Riddle's diary, his room was ransacked and the diary vanished. Later, it turned out Ginny had taken it while under Riddle's control. But how did she know Harry had it? The book includes a missing scene. On Valentine's Day, Ginny saw the diary fall from Harry's hands during an argument with Malfoy. From that moment, she knew where to find it. The film simply skipped that part. Number 6. Why the trio visited Hagrid at night. Sorcerer's Stone. In the movie, Harry, Ron, and Hermione go to Hagrid's hut at night, which seems odd. Why not wait until morning or use the invisibility cloak? In the book, it all makes sense. Ron was in the hospital wing after Norbert bit him, while Harry and Hermione were secretly carrying the dragon to the astronomy tower to hand it over to Ron's brother Charlie. They were using the cloak, and Malfoy found out from a letter he'd stolen from Ron. Number 7. How Expelliarmus really works. Prisoner of Azkaban. In the films, the spell Expelliarmus behaves inconsistently. Sometimes it just knocks away a wand, sometimes it throws the person across the room. The books explain it simply. The power of the spell depends on who casts it. When Harry, Hermione and Ron disarmed Snape at the same time, their combined magic threw him backward. That's why the effect seemed so strong. Number 8. Where the mirror shard came from, Deathly Hallows, Part 1. The shard of mirror that helps Harry see Dumbledore and survive remains a mystery in the films. They never explain what it is or why he has it. In truth, it's part of a two-way mirror Sirius gave him. Harry and Sirius each had one so they could talk over long distances. After Sirius's death, Harry smashed his and kept one shard as a keepsake. Number 9. Why Voldemort didn't feel the Horcruxes. In the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, each time a Horcrux is destroyed, Voldemort grows weaker, but he never reacts with full awareness. He doesn't scream in agony or sense which piece of his soul has been lost. For many viewers that seemed strange, and surely a wizard who tied his life to these objects would feel their destruction. But in the books, Rowling reveals the tragic truth. Voldemort no longer possessed the wholeness of soul required to feel such pain. He had mutilated it beyond recognition. He had deliberately ripped his soul into 7 pieces, Dumbledore explains, and what remained was barely human. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione destroy each Horcrux, Voldemort feels only waves of unease, an undefined fear gnawing at him. In one chilling passage, he senses something was wrong, something was missing, but he cannot understand why. The connection to his soul fragments has long been severed. His immortality, built through cruelty and arrogance, blinds him to his own unraveling. So when he finally realizes that his Horcruxes are gone, it is not through intuition, it is through panic. The man who sought to conquer death cannot even feel the death of his own soul. Number 10. How Neville got the sword. When Neville Longbottom pulls the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat in The Deathly Hallows, Part 2, it feels sudden, almost miraculous. The audience sees a shy boy transformed into a hero in a single swing. But the film never explains why he could do what even seasoned wizards could not. In the book, the answer lies in the sword's magic and Neville's courage. As Dumbledore once told Harry, only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that sword out of the hat. The weapon reveals itself only to someone who proves their bravery when it matters most. That moment comes when Neville stands before Voldemort, surrounded by Death Eaters, and refuses to surrender. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he shouts. He knows he's facing death, yet he doesn't flinch. In that instant, he embodies the very heart of Gryffindor, courage without hope of reward. The sword responds, appearing in the hat, as it once did for Harry in the Chamber of Secrets. With one stroke, Neville destroys Nagini, the final Horcrux, shattering Voldemort's last defense. His triumph is not luck. It is destiny rewarding bravery, the quiet victory of a boy who had spent 7 years learning what it truly means to be brave. Number 11, where Winky went and why it matters. In the Goblet of Fire film, the story of the Crouch family feels rushed and confusing. Bartemius Crouch Jr. suddenly appears, disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, but we never learn how he escaped Azkaban or how his father hid him for years. The missing key to that mystery is a house elf named Winky, a character completely erased from the movie. Her absence removes not only emotional depth, but also the very logic behind the Crouch family's downfall. In the book, Winky is devoted to her master, Bartemius Crouch Sr., and secretly tends to his imprisoned son at home. Under the Imperious curse, Crouch Jr. lives hidden from the world, but it is Winky who brings him food, care, and company. During the Quidditch World Cup, she attends the event carrying her master's seat and the wand that later casts the dark mark. When this is discovered, Crouch Sr. terrified of exposure, dismisses her on the spot. "Winky is not being free," she cries through tears, clutching her tea towel like a shroud. Her dismissal shatters her, and symbolically, the fragile loyalty that held the Crouch family together. Afterward, Winky takes refuge at Hogwarts, drinking butterbeer in despair and refusing freedom. Through her story, Rowling reveals the tragedy behind the Crouch name, a father who valued reputation over love, and a son twisted by control and secrecy. Winky's quiet suffering mirrors the moral rot within the family she served. Without her, the film loses the thread that connects the rise of Crouch Jr. to the collapse of his father's honor, and with it, one of the most haunting family stories in the wizarding world. Number 12. What the Order of Merlin means for Lockhart. In the Chamber of Secrets, Professor Gilderoy Lockhart struts through Hogwarts like a peacock, dazzling everyone with his smile and stories of heroism. "Order of Merlin, 3rd class," he announces proudly, as if that alone should command awe. The students clap, the teachers roll their eyes, yet the film never explains what this grand-sounding title means. To most viewers, it's just another of Lockhart's pompous boasts. But in the wizarding world, the Order of Merlin is no small honor. It is the highest award a witch or wizard can receive. In J.K. Rowling's books, the Order of Merlin is comparable to being knighted by the British Crown. Founded by Merlin himself, it's granted for great achievements in magic, bravery, or service to the community. Albus Dumbledore, for example, holds the first-class medal for his victory over the dark wizard Grindelwald. So when Lockhart flaunts his third-class medal, it places him, at least in the public eye, among legendary figures. It's no wonder that witches swooned and booksellers lined up to host his autograph signings. But the truth behind that medal is as false as his smile. Lockhart never performed the heroic deeds he wrote about. Every adventure in his best-selling books, from defeating banshees in Bandon to wrestling werewolves in Wagga Wagga, was stolen from real wizards. He used the Obliviate charm to erase their memories and claim their stories as his own. "I'll have to do the same to you," he admits to Harry and Ron in the chamber, his mask slipping at last. The Order of Merlin, shining proudly on his chest, is nothing more than a trophy of lies. This irony makes his downfall deliciously fitting. When the Obliviate spell backfires and wipes his own memory, the fraud who built his fame on stealing others' glory forgets who he ever was. The man who once bragged of medals and honors is left empty, stripped of identity, stripped of deceit. The Order of Merlin that once symbolized prestige becomes the perfect emblem of his vanity and punishment. Number 13, why Pettigrew died differently in the book. Peter Pettigrew's death in the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, passes almost unnoticed. In the movie, he appears for a brief moment during the chaos in Malfoy Manor, then simply collapses. No reason given, no weight, no justice. Viewers barely have time to register the fall of the man who betrayed James and Lily Potter. The films treat his death like a footnote, but in the books, it is one of the most poetic moments in the entire saga. In Rowling's version, the scene is tight with tension. Harry and Ron are trapped in the cellar of Malfoy Manor. Pettigrew bursts in, silver hand gleaming, a gift from Voldemort for his service. When Harry struggles to escape, Peter seizes him by the throat. "You're going to kill me after all, Wormtail?" Harry gasps, reminding him of the life debt between them, the moment years earlier when Harry had spared him at the Shrieking Shack. For one heartbeat, the rat hesitates, his grip falters, compassion, weak, human, forbidden, flickers in his eyes. That flicker, seals his fate. The silver hand Voldemort gave him turns against its master. The metal fingers tightened. Pettigrew made a strangled noise. It crushes his throat, killing him instantly. The magic recognized what Voldemort feared most: betrayal, born of pity. The hand, enchanted to serve without mercy, punished that hesitation as treason. It's not Harry or Ron who defeat him, but his own cowardice, the same cowardice that once made him serve the Dark Lord. In that moment, Rowling closes a perfect circle. Pettigrew, who lived by fear and submission, dies by the very gift he once received for loyalty. His end is not just a death, it's judgment. The man who betrayed friendship, love and courage is destroyed by the hand that symbolized his obedience. In the book, his death feels like justice. In the movie, it feels like it never happened. Number 14, Why the Dursleys Hated Harry. From the very first minutes of The Sorcerer's Stone, the Dursleys' cruelty toward Harry feels almost cartoonish. Vernon's shouting, Petunia's glares, and Dudley's taunts paint a picture of a household built on spite. They force Harry to live in a cupboard under the stairs, treat him as a servant, and pretend he doesn't exist. Yet the films never explain why. Why would a family hate a child who had already lost everything? The answer lies in what the movies left behind: the quiet, festering envy of Petunia Dursley. In the books, we learn that Petunia Evans once dreamed of being part of her sister Lily's magical world. When Lily received her letter to Hogwarts, Petunia wrote one of her own, begging Dumbledore to let her come too. His reply was kind but firm. Magic cannot be taught to those who don't possess it. Rowling reveals this secret through Dumbledore's words in the Deathly Hallows. You are the only sister of a witch. I remember your letter. You wanted to come to Hogwarts as well. That rejection wounded Petunia deeply. It turned her admiration for Lily into a bitter grudge she carried all her life. Every glimpse of Harry reminded Petunia of that wound. His eyes were Lily's eyes. His presence in her home was a constant echo of the world that had once rejected her. So she built walls of denial, of normalcy, of cruelty. She clung to the belief that magic was freakish and shameful, convincing herself that treating Harry harshly would somehow erase her envy. My perfect sister got herself blown up, she once snapped in the book, her words trembling, with something that sounded less like hatred and more like pain. Vernon, ever eager to dominate and mock what he didn't understand, absorbed Petunia's bitterness and made it his own. Together they created a home where magic was forbidden and love was conditional. The films showed their hostility, but only the books reveal its tragic roots. Not pure malice, but the quiet poison of jealousy, a sister's lifelong resentment toward the magic she could never have. Number 15, How Sirius Escaped Azkaban. Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban is one of the most mysterious events in the Harry Potter films. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the movie gives only a vague explanation that Sirius was strong enough to resist the Dementors and somehow broke free. For such a terrifying prison guarded by soul-sucking creatures, this feels almost impossible. The film leaves us wondering, how could one man outwit guards who feed on every trace of hope and joy? In J.K. Rowling's book, however, the truth is far more ingenious. Sirius was not just a wizard, he was an unregistered animagus, able to transform into a large black dog. The Dementors can't see, he explains to Harry later. They feel their way toward people by sensing their emotions. When Sirius turned into a dog, his human emotions faded becoming simple and instinctive. To the Dementors, he felt almost empty, not worth feeding on. This secret kept him sane while the other prisoners slowly lost their minds. He waited. He observed. When he saw in a newspaper that Peter Pettigrew, the true traitor, was alive and hiding as Ron Weasley's pet rat, something inside him snapped. "I saw the picture, and I knew he was at Hogwarts," Sirius recalls. That moment of fury gave him the strength to act. Taking his dog form, thin and desperate but determined, he slipped through the bars of his cell, the guards too numb to notice the shadow of an animal creeping past them. Sirius swam through the freezing waters of the North Sea, guided only by rage and purpose. By the time the world learned of his escape, he was already on his way to find Harry, not to harm him, but to protect him and expose the truth. The books make his escape not an act of madness, but of brilliance, the desperate, silent triumph of a man who refused to let injustice consume him. Number 16. Why Voldemort chose Harry. The prophecy that forever changed the course of wizarding history began in a shadowed room above the Hog's Head Inn, where Sybil Trelawney, trembling and pale, spoke words that neither she nor Albus Dumbledore could fully comprehend. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. These few lines, uttered in a trance, set in motion a chain of events that would determine the fate of two families, the Potters and the Longbottoms, and seal the destiny of the Dark Lord himself. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, this prophecy is revisited, yet the film adaptation offers only a glimpse of its significance, leaving out the most crucial detail: the reason why Voldemort chose Harry over another boy who fit the same description, Neville Longbottom. The prophecy's wording was vague, a riddle open to interpretation. Two boys met its terms. Both were born at the end of July, and both to parents who had defied Lord Voldemort 3 times. One was Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, both members of the Order of the Phoenix. The other was Neville Longbottom, son of Frank and Alice, esteemed Aurors who had fought bravely against the Death Eaters. In the book, Dumbledore explains that Voldemort's decision to mark Harry as his equal was not predestined by the prophecy itself, but by Voldemort's own choice, a choice rooted in fear, arrogance, and prejudice. Voldemort, though powerful and cunning, was blinded by a fatal flaw, his obsession with blood purity. He despised Muggle-borns, considering them inferior and unworthy of magic. Yet paradoxically, he was himself the child of a witch and a Muggle, a heritage he loathed. When he learned of the prophecy, he saw in Harry Potter, the half-blood son of Lily Evans, a reflection of himself. Neville, in contrast, was pure-blooded, born from an old magical family. To Voldemort's twisted logic, Harry posed the greater threat precisely because he symbolized what the Dark Lord despised within himself, a reminder that power and potential could emerge from impurity. The irony is haunting. By choosing Harry, Voldemort unknowingly ensured the prophecy would come true. The words, "and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives," sealed his fate the moment he acted. Dumbledore later told Harry, "Voldemort himself marked you as his equal. He chose you, and that made you the chosen one." The choice was not destiny's whim, but the result of Voldemort's decision to attack a child who mirrored his own nature. When Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow on that cold October night, he believed he was erasing a threat before it could grow. In truth, he was creating it. Lily's sacrifice, an act of pure love, produced an ancient magic he could neither comprehend nor conquer. The killing curse rebounded, shattering his body and spirit, leaving behind a scar that became a living link between them. In that instant, Harry became the embodiment of the prophecy. The film portrays this moment only briefly, as a flash of memory, but the book offers a deeper reflection, the tragedy of a man whose own actions fulfilled the very fate he sought to escape. Neville's story, too, carries quiet tragedy and immense meaning. Born just a day before Harry, he was every bit as suitable a candidate for the prophecy. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were heroes tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange and other Death Eaters shortly after Voldemort's fall. Their suffering left Neville an orphan in all but name, raised by his strict grandmother. The prophecy could have easily been his burden had Voldemort chosen differently. Dumbledore explained this to Harry in his office after the battle at the Department of Mysteries, emphasizing that it was the Dark Lord who singled you out as his equal. He made you what you are. In the Order of the Phoenix, this moment between Harry and Dumbledore is one of the most significant in the series. Dumbledore admits he withheld the full prophecy for years, fearing Harry was not ready to carry its weight. But now, after losing Sirius and witnessing death firsthand, Harry learns the cruel truth. The war was never about destiny alone. It was about choices, Voldemort's, Dumbledore's, and his own. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities, Dumbledore once told him. That message resonates powerfully when contrasted with Voldemort's decision. The Dark Lord acted out of prejudice and fear. Harry would later act out of love and courage. The prophecy's ambiguity makes it one of the most fascinating elements in Rowling's world-building. It reveals how fate in the wizarding world operates not as an unbreakable law, but as a potential path, one that becomes reality only when people act upon it. Voldemort's interpretation created his enemy. Had he ignored it, Neville might have grown up with parents intact, Harry might have lived a quiet life, and Voldemort might have remained unchallenged for years. In Dumbledore's words, the prophecy does not mean you had to be the one to face him, Harry, only that Voldemort believed it did. In the film adaptation of The Order of the Phoenix, this nuance is almost entirely absent. The movie shows a brief conversation in which Harry retrieves the glass sphere containing the prophecy and hears Trelawney's voice repeating the words, but it offers no explanation of how Neville fits into the picture or why Voldemort made his fateful choice. As a result, viewers unfamiliar with the books might assume Harry was destined to be the chosen one from birth. The truth, as the novel reveals, is far more complex and morally profound. It is not fate that made Harry special, it was Voldemort's own hand. Number 17, How the Half-Blood Prince was Revealed. In the dim light of the Hogwarts library, as if echoing the flicker of candle flames over centuries of secrets, one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Severus Snape finds its resolution not on screen, but within the pages of J.K. Rowling's sixth novel. The Half-Blood Prince, a cryptic signature scrawled in the margins of an old potions textbook, captures the attention of readers far more deeply than the brief reveal in the film ever could. The movie ends abruptly after Snape proclaims, "I am the Half-Blood Prince," leaving many puzzled as to what those words truly mean. In the book, however, the revelation is rich with emotion, history, and tragedy, a portrait of a man forever torn between two worlds. Severus Snape's self-given title, the Half-Blood Prince, is more than just a pseudonym. It is a name carved from pain, heritage, and rebellion. Rowling gives us the missing puzzle piece early on in the novel through quiet, easily overlooked lines. Snape's mother, Eileen Prince, was a witch. His father, Tobias Snape, was a muggle, an ordinary man harsh and unloving. This union of two incompatible worlds bred not harmony, but discord, and from this fractured home rose a boy desperate to define himself. Snape, even as a student at Hogwarts, was an outsider, too clever for his peers, too dark for their trust, and too poor for their respect. In calling himself the Half-Blood Prince, he was reclaiming what he could not change, his mixed heritage, and turning it into power. The films omit this crucial emotional foundation, perhaps for brevity, but the books bring it to life with sharp, human clarity. Harry first encounters the name when he opens a second-hand advanced potion-making textbook in Professor Slughorn's class. The inside cover bears a faint inscription. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. Within its margins lie spells, corrections, and dark enchantments far beyond a student's level. To Harry, this mysterious author becomes a silent teacher, transforming his disastrous start in potions into sudden brilliance. The Half-Blood Prince's annotations guide him to success, to victory in class competitions, and even to an unsettling confidence he had never felt before. But Rowling ensures that what begins as a gift gradually becomes a curse. The deeper Harry delves into the prince's writings, the more he senses something dangerous lurking beneath their genius. One spell in particular, Sectum Sempra, marked for enemies, nearly kills Draco Malfoy in a bathroom duel. In that moment, Harry realizes that his unseen mentor was no benevolent scholar. The ink on the page conceals a shadow, a story untold. When Snape storms in, heals Draco, and demands to see the textbook, readers feel the weight of decades collapsing into a single instant. Snape's fury is not just about the forbidden spell. It is the fury of a man whose secret identity has been defiled, whose private self has been discovered by the son of his enemy. In Rowling's narrative, Snape's choice of the name Half-Blood Prince speaks volumes about his psyche. Born into an abusive home, surrounded by shouting and neglect, he clung to his mother's side of the family, the magical, noble, and mysterious prince lineage. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Rowling writes, "The source of the name was revealed at last. Eileen Prince, Snape's mother, had been a witch, his father, Tobias Snape, a muggle. Snape had thus made up his nickname, the Half-Blood Prince." These words, simple as they are, carry the full tragedy of Snape's life. The boy who hated his father's cruelty chose to erase that part of himself, finding comfort only in the heritage of his mother, yet even there his identity was fractured, half blood, half love, half hatred. The book paints Snape as a man perpetually caught between worlds. His allegiance to Dumbledore's cause and his former loyalty to Voldemort mirror his split heritage. He was neither fully dark nor fully good. He belonged to both, and to neither. In adopting the name of his mother's family, Snape symbolically buried Tobias Snape, the man who had caused him so much pain, and rebuilt himself as someone new. But the cruelty of fate ensured that this reinvention never freed him. Instead, it became a constant reminder of what he could never escape: his origins. Harry's discovery of the truth in the book is quiet, almost anticlimactic, yet it resonates far more deeply than the film's cinematic reveal. In the novel's closing chapters, Harry and Dumbledore's death have shaken the world. Afterward, in the headmaster's office, Harry reflects upon the shattered pieces of the mystery. Hermione tells him what she has found in the library, a record of Eileen Prince, a witch once on the Hogwarts Gobstones team. The truth clicks into place. There is no dramatic confrontation, no stormy music, only the slow understanding that the Half-Blood Prince was not a title of grandeur, but one of sorrow. This revelation changes the way readers see every moment of Snape's life. His contempt for pure-blood arrogance, his scorn for those like Lucius Malfoy who sneer at Muggle-borns, his harshness towards students, all of it comes into focus. Snape, born half-blood, grew up despised by both sides, Muggles who feared magic and wizards who valued blood purity. He found power in knowledge, in darkness, in names. The half-blood prince was his armor, forged from rejection and longing. Rowling's prose subtly hints at this transformation long before the reveal, making the eventual discovery both inevitable and heartbreaking. Number 18. Why Fleur and Bill's Wedding Felt Rushed. When the camera pans across the Burrow's sunlit garden in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, the audience witnesses a seemingly spontaneous event, the wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour. The scene bursts with colour, laughter, and the hum of celebration, yet for many moviegoers it feels oddly abrupt. Bill, after all, had barely been seen before this moment. There was no courtship, no emotional build-up, no foundation for why this French witch and the eldest Weasley son were suddenly tying the knot amidst a looming war. For those who knew only the films, it felt like a new storyline materializing from thin air. But in the books, this union had been long in the making, a relationship tested by injury, loyalty, and the shadow of Voldemort's return. Fleur Delacour first appeared in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, dazzling both Hogwarts students and readers with her Veela charm and competitive spirit. She was the champion of beau bâton, graceful yet proud, and though her beauty initially defined her, Fleur's deeper qualities unfolded gradually. During her time at Hogwarts, she interned at Gringotts, the wizarding bank where Bill Weasley worked as a curse-breaker. Rowling describes Fleur's admiration for Bill's courage and independence, traits that mirrored her own fierce determination. In the book, it is not a love-at-first-sight fairy tale, but a slow recognition between two ambitious and self-assured people. Their affection developed beyond glamour and charm, forming a bond rooted in shared experience and respect. By the time readers reached Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Fleur had become a regular presence at the Burrow, much to the discomfort of Molly Weasley. The matriarch viewed Fleur as vain and shallow, doubting her devotion to Bill. Rowling captures this domestic tension vividly. Molly didn't approve of Fleur. She thought she was too stuck up, and she didn't like the way Fleur called her Mrs. Weasley. The skepticism extended to Ginny, who mockingly nicknamed her Phlegm. But beneath the teasing and the tension, Fleur remained steadfast. Her love for Bill did not waver, even when the Weasleys treated her as an outsider. This friction, far from weakening her role, set the stage for one of the most powerful moments of character revelation in the series. That revelation arrived through tragedy. During the climactic events at the end of Half-Blood Prince, Fenrir Greyback, the savage werewolf loyal to Voldemort, attacked Bill during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower. Though Bill was not fully turned into a werewolf, the scars he bore were deep, both physically and symbolically. In the book, Molly expected Fleur to recoil from her disfigured fiancé. Instead, Fleur's reaction silenced all her critics. Rowling writes, "You thought I would not wish to marry him, or perhaps you thought I would not love him if he had been disfigured. You thought because of these scars I would not want to marry him anymore." It was a stunning moment of defiance and devotion. Fleur, often dismissed as superficial, revealed herself as courageous, loyal, and profoundly loving. This was the turning point in her relationship with the Weasleys. From that moment, Molly's heart softened, and Fleur earned her place in the family. This scene in the book serves as one of Rowling's most emotionally charged illustrations of love's resilience. It transformed Fleur from a peripheral character into a figure of strength. The scars on Bill's face became emblems of survival, while Fleur's steadfastness became a symbol of unconditional commitment. It was this ordeal that prompted their decision to marry sooner rather than later. In the uncertain days following Dumbledore's death, with the wizarding world descending into chaos, the wedding was not a frivolous celebration, but an act of defiance, a promise of hope amid fear. Fleur and Bill's decision to go forward with their marriage reflected a deeply human need for connection when the world was falling apart. The films, however, stripped away this intricate emotional context. Bill's appearance in Deathly Hallows, Part 1, is abrupt. He introduces himself to Harry as if to remind viewers who he is. Bill Weasley, Fleur's husband. The audience barely has time to register the introduction before the story moves into the wedding scene. Gone are the family tensions, the attack, and the redemption arc that made Fleur's love story so compelling. Without these layers, the cinematic wedding becomes an isolated spectacle. Visually beautiful, yes, but emotionally hollow. The absence of build-up leaves viewers confused. Wondering when these two characters met and why their marriage matters within the larger narrative. This omission is not merely a matter of missing scenes, but of character depth. In Rowling's world, relationships carry moral and emotional weight. Bill and Fleur's marriage was not just a romantic subplot, it demonstrated unity against darkness, the triumph of love over fear, and the growth of a family once divided by misunderstanding. The wedding symbolized reconciliation between the Weasleys and Fleur, a quiet but profound victory. In the book, even Molly helps with the preparations, having finally accepted Fleur as her daughter-in-law. There is a line filled with understated warmth when Molly says, "We're all family now." This simple statement embodies what the films fail to convey. That love, in the end, heals more than magic ever could. The book also paints the wedding itself in rich, symbolic hues. The event takes place at the Burrow under a tent, shimmering with golden light, the same color as hope in dark times. Rowling describes the atmosphere as beautiful and bittersweet, the guests laughing, while a sense of foreboding lingers beneath the surface. It is a celebration shadowed by war, the last moment of peace before chaos erupts. The speeches, the music, and even the details of Fleur's silver gown serve to remind readers that joy persists even when doom looms overhead. Harry, disguised as a cousin, looks around and feels that rare blend of happiness and fear, an emotional duality that defines the entire Deathly Hallows story. Number 19. Why Harry's green eyes matter. When readers first entered the world of Harry Potter, one of the first details that defined the young boy with the lightning scar was his eyes. J.K. Rowling described them in the opening pages of The Philosopher's Stone as bright green like fresh pickled toads, and later returned to that description again and again. They were not just a physical trait, they were a symbol, a key connection to his mother, Lily Potter, whose love was the very essence of his survival. Yet when the films arrived, audiences found themselves looking into Daniel Radcliffe's blue eyes. For many casual viewers, this seemed insignificant. But for readers, it was a moment that quietly altered the emotional weight of one of the story's most powerful symbolic threads. Throughout the books, characters constantly remarked that Harry had his mother's eyes. It was not a throwaway compliment, but a recurring reminder of love, sacrifice, and lineage. When Snape looked at Harry for the last time in the Deathly Hallows, Rowling wrote that the green eyes found the black. Those few words carried an entire lifetime of regret and redemption. Snape's love for Lily, unspoken and eternal, found closure only in the reflection of her eyes, Harry's eyes. The colour was not a mere detail of genetics, it was the bridge between life and death, between past and present. And that bridge, in the films, became almost invisible. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers were aware of the importance of this feature. Early production notes show that they attempted to give Daniel Radcliffe green-coloured contact lenses to preserve the canonical detail. However, within hours of shooting the first scenes, Radcliffe developed a severe allergic reaction. His eyes swelled, reddened, and he could barely open them under the studio lights. The decision was made quickly: abandon the lenses. The colour of Harry's eyes would stay blue. The production team reasoned that this small inconsistency was preferable to discomfort or medical risk. For the directors, the emotional connection between Lily and Harry could be conveyed through words and performances, even if the visual symbol was lost. But Rowling had chosen the colour green for a reason. Green, in her world, carried powerful associations. It was the colour of Avada Kedavra, the killing curse, the same green flash that ended Lily's life. It was also the colour of renewal, of life, of the power that persisted beyond death. Lily's green eyes in Harry represented the duality of love and death intertwined. When Voldemort looked into them, he faced the very love that destroyed him. When Snape looked into them, he saw the ghost of the woman he could never forget. The colour itself was part of the spell, a visual motif echoing through 7 books of pain, redemption, and inheritance. The first time this connection became truly emotional in the novels was during the Mirror of Erised scene. When Harry saw his parents reflected in the glass, he stared into his mother's eyes. Rowling wrote, "She had the same shape face and the same bright green eyes." That moment struck deeply because Harry saw not only his parents but also himself in them. He recognized that a part of Lily lived within him, not through blood or memory, but through something visible, constant, and real. The eyes were a legacy that no curse could erase. On screen, this moment still worked, but something ineffable was missing. Without the green reflection, the viewer lost that immediate, instinctive recognition that tied the two figures together. It might seem trivial to some, but the film's omission of green eyes created a subtle dissonance that echoed throughout the series. When characters like Remus Lupin or Professor Slughorn mentioned Harry's resemblance to Lily, audiences unfamiliar with the books might have wondered why they emphasized the eyes so much. "You have your mother's eyes," Slughorn told him in Half-Blood Prince, his voice trembling as he remembered the woman who once gave him comfort. But the visual connection didn't strike as hard because Radcliffe's eyes were not Lily's. It was as if the mirror between generations had cracked and only readers could still see the reflection. For Severus Snape, this detail was central to his entire character arc. In the Deathly Hallows, when he sacrificed his life, his final request to Harry was to look at me. Rowling made those words echo through the silence of the battle. Snape's dying wish was to look one last time into Lily's eyes. Not her face, not her photograph, but the living trace of her love that endured through Harry. The visual detail made this moment sacred in the books. When the same scene arrived in the film, Alan Rickman delivered it with devastating emotion, but for readers who knew the symbolic power of green, something felt incomplete. Snape was looking into blue eyes, not the same eyes that once looked back at him in the cottage in Godric's Hollow. This difference also affected how audiences interpreted Lily's protection. In the novels, her sacrifice was not only a magical barrier, but a living force that resided in Harry. Dumbledore explained to him, "Your mother's eyes. They have saved you more times than you can know. The metaphor carried both literal and emotional truth. Her love shielded him. Her gaze continued through his. It was as if every time Harry faced danger, Lily was looking at the world through his eyes, defying death itself. The color green, traditionally associated with rebirth and the eternal cycle, strengthened this theme. In the films, without that color cue, this layer of meaning had to rely solely on dialogue and performance. Ironically, the decision to keep Radcliffe's natural blue eyes also reflected something unintentionally poetic. Blue, the color of the sky and water, gave Harry an innocence and openness that fit his cinematic portrayal. Yet this blue diluted the symbolic unity that Rowling had woven. The Harry of the books was born of his mother's love and bore it in his gaze. The Harry of the films carried that love through his heart and words instead. The emotional core remained, but the visual storytelling lost one of its most elegant threads. It's worth remembering that the filmmakers faced other similar challenges when adapting Rowling's meticulous world. Hair colors, physical descriptions, even certain scars shifted from page to screen. But most of those changes were cosmetic. The eyes, however, were emblematic. Rowling herself once emphasized that detail in interviews, stating that Harry's green eyes were very important because they tie him to Lily in a way that no one can break. That choice was deliberate, an author's use of color as a language of emotion. And though the films had to compromise for practical reasons, the loss of that detail reminded fans how deeply intertwined visual symbolism and storytelling can be. Many fans have speculated on how the films might have handled this differently. Some suggested that Lily's actress, Geraldine Somerville, could have worn blue lenses to match Radcliffe, reversing the visual connection. Others proposed digital enhancement. But the filmmakers believed that emotional authenticity mattered more than chromatic accuracy. Director Chris Columbus argued that Radcliffe's natural eyes were expressive enough to convey the essence of the connection, even without the exact hue. He was right in part. Audiences did feel that bond. But for readers, the shade of green was not just a preference. It was the echo of a mother's love made visible. One of the most touching reflections on this detail comes not from the films or books, but from the readers themselves. Many have described moments when they reread the Deathly Hallows and paused at the scene of Snape's death, imagining those green eyes watching him. For them, the color carries memory, grief, and absolution. It becomes a symbol of everything the story is about: love that endures beyond life, sacrifice that redeems even the damned, and the idea that our eyes, the windows to the soul, carry the essence of those we've lost. This idea loses some of its visual poetry on screen, but it still breathes in the imagination of every reader who remembers the original line. In The Prince's Tale, when Harry finally views Snape's memories, the truth unfolds with heartbreaking precision. He watches the young Lily by the lake, her green eyes shining with laughter. He sees Snape's longing gaze fixed on them, a look that would define his entire life. The color, again, is the axis of the emotion. It represents not only the woman he loved, but also the innocence he could never return to. Rowling did not write these details casually. They were the visual backbone of her emotional language. The films translated the story, but the color lost its magic in the process. Even in the final scene of the Deathly Hallows, when Harry stands on platform 9 3/4 as an adult, the detail lingers in readers' minds. Rowling describes his son Albus with bright green eyes like his mother's. The circle closes and the legacy continues. Love passes through generations not only in names but in eyes. The movies capture the warmth of that scene, the tenderness between Harry and his family, but for those who remember the books, the absent green feels like a missing note in a symphony. Subtle but vital. In the end, the question of Harry's eyes is more than a trivia point for devoted fans. It is a reminder of how stories carry meaning in every detail. Rowling's choice of colour shaped not only how characters saw Harry, but how readers understood love, memory, and destiny. When those details are lost, the essence still survives, but it shifts, like magic seen through glass, slightly blurred, yet still shining. The films gave us a blue-eyed Harry who carried his mother's love in spirit. The books gave us a green-eyed boy whose gaze itself was love's last spell. Both versions live together now, side by side, each reflecting a different truth about the same hero, the boy who looked at the world with his mother's eyes. Number 20. Why Hermione erased her parents' memories. When the camera opens on Hermione Granger in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, standing in the warm light of her living room, her expression is calm, but her wand hand trembles. The moment lasts only a few seconds. She raises her wand toward her parents, murmurs the spell Obliviate, and watches their images vanish from the framed photos on the mantelpiece. It is a haunting scene, a quiet farewell that passes almost without a word. The film leaves it at that, an act of necessity, a quick spell, and Hermione walking out the door into danger. Yet in J.K. Rowling's book, this scene holds an emotional gravity far beyond what the movie reveals. It is not just about erasing memory, it is about the deliberate destruction of one's own happiness for the sake of a higher cause. In the book, Hermione does not simply wipe the memories of her parents. She performs one of the most complex and morally heavy acts of magic a witch can attempt. Rowling writes she had made her parents believe that they were different people with different names, and that their life's ambition was to go to Australia. It is a single sentence tucked almost modestly into the flow of narrative, but it carries enormous emotional weight. The words tell us that Hermione not only removed herself from their minds, but built new lives for them, new identities, new desires, new safety, far from England's darkening skies. In essence, she rewrote her parents' existence so completely that they could never even wonder what they had lost. This distinction between erasure and transformation is crucial. In the film, Hermione's spell feels like a cruel necessity. She deletes her parents' love as easily as one might erase a photograph. But in the novel, her act is strategic and deeply selfless. She does not abandon them, but hides them behind a perfect illusion, ensuring that no trace of Hermione Granger remains in their world. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Granger, unnamed but ever-loving, become Wendell and Monica Wilkins, a dentist couple with a dream of emigrating. In doing this, Hermione achieves what even seasoned wizards like Albus Dumbledore might have called a masterwork of defensive magic. She builds a world in which her parents are free from fear, not merely from memory. Imagine the preparation this would require. The spell Obliviate is not a charm taught to young students at Hogwarts. We see its devastating effects earlier in the series when Gilderoy Lockhart uses it on others, and ultimately on himself, with disastrous results. Hermione's use of it is deliberate, studied, and controlled. This reveals her incredible discipline as a witch, but even more, it shows her courage. She is 16, standing against forces that even the Ministry of Magic cannot contain, and yet she calmly manipulates one of the most dangerous charms in existence on the people she loves most. There is no teacher to guide her, no spellbook to confirm she is doing it right. Her mastery comes not from talent alone, but from desperation and determination, the same traits that define her throughout the series. What the book allows readers to feel is the agony behind her precision. Rowling never gives Hermione a breakdown scene. There are no tears, no speeches about sacrifice. Instead, the pain is implied in her silence. Later, when Ron and Harry learn what she has done, Hermione only says, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia." The understatement is stunning. There is no self-pity, no expectation of sympathy. The girl who once scolded her friends for breaking school rules now confesses to rewriting the lives of her parents, and she speaks of it as if it were homework completed on time. This quietness is what makes her action so powerful. In that still moment, she embodies the spirit of the Order of the Phoenix, the willingness to lose everything to stop Voldemort's reign. Unlike Harry, who is driven by prophecy, or Ron, whose family ties bind him to the cause, Hermione chooses this war. She is a Muggle-born witch. She could have hidden. She could have saved her parents and herself by disappearing. Instead, she erases the very ties that could protect her emotionally. That is why this act is one of the most profound in the series. It transforms Hermione from a brilliant student into a soldier of light. Rowling's choice to explain the depth of Hermione's magic in words rather than scenes mirrors the character's own restraint. Readers are not given flashbacks or long reflections, only fragments of her sorrow. Yet those fragments speak volumes. The line, "She had made her parents believe that they were different people," is devastating precisely because it is so clinical. It is written in the language of a report, not a confession. Hermione hides her pain behind logic, the way she always does, but the reader can see what it costs her. She has effectively killed her parents in one life so that they might live in another. In contrast, the film's brief depiction feels more like a symbolic montage. The audience sees Hermione vanish from family photographs as if her very existence is erased from history. It is cinematic, elegant, but shallow. The film omits the details that show how far Hermione went to protect them. The Grangers in the movie are passive victims of a charm. In the book, they are active participants in a constructed illusion. The difference changes everything. In the novel, they are safe because Hermione is brilliant enough to create a lie strong enough to survive Voldemort's reach. In the film, they are simply forgotten. The tragedy becomes even deeper when one considers what this means for Hermione herself. Her parents are alive, but to her, they are dead. She can never write to them, never visit them, never risk undoing the spell. Her childhood home is gone, her identity severed. Every act of bravery that follows, from infiltrating the Ministry to enduring Malfoy Manor, is built on this foundation of loss. Hermione's courage is not born on the battlefield. It begins in her living room, in that small act of magic that cost her everything she loved. Throughout the book, Hermione rarely mentions her parents again. This silence is deliberate. Rowling could have reminded readers of their fate, but she doesn't. The absence of the Grangers becomes its own ghostly presence, a symbol of what every member of the trio stands to lose. For Hermione, victory against Voldemort means nothing if her parents cannot remember her. Yet she accepts this, showing a maturity that even older wizards lack. The war against evil, she understands, demands invisible sacrifices, acts of goodness that leave no monuments. When the war finally ends, the book does not detail how Hermione restores her parents' memories, but Rowling later confirmed that she does. Readers can imagine the reunion, the quiet house in Australia, the moment Hermione appears at the door, the first flicker of confusion, and then recognition. It is a small redemption, but an earned one. Still, the emotional wound remains. The Hermione who returns to them is not the girl who left. She has seen death, torture, betrayal. Her parents, free of those memories, will never truly understand what their daughter endured. This difference between book and film echoes one of the larger challenges of adaptation. Cinema thrives on visible emotion, tears, expressions, movement. Literature thrives on what is unspoken. In Rowling's world, Hermione's greatest acts often happen off-screen, in the quiet of thought and research. The filmmakers captured her bravery, but not her sorrow. They gave us the image of a girl disappearing from photographs, but they could not show the invisible complexity of her mind, the calculus of loss and love that drove her to such an extreme. It is also important to remember the moral weight of Obliviate. Throughout the series, memory is sacred. Dumbledore warns that forgive and forget is a dangerous concept in magic. To tamper with the mind is to play God. Hermione's decision, then, is not merely protective, it is transgressive. She crosses an ethical line that few dare approach, yet she does so without hesitation because the world has given her no other choice. This complexity gives her action a tragic nobility. It is not the act of a naive girl, but of a young woman who understands that saving the world sometimes means losing oneself. In this way, Hermione's spell on her parents mirrors the theme of death that runs throughout Deathly Hallows. Harry must face his own mortality. Hermione faces the symbolic death of her family. Both accept their losses before the final battle, which is why they can endure it. The spell becomes Hermione's own form of Horcrux, not of evil, but of sacrifice. She divides her heart, hides part of herself in another life, and keeps going. The pain never leaves her, but it makes her stronger. Perhaps that is why readers still remember this brief moment more vividly than many battles. It is small, quiet, almost invisible, yet it captures the essence of heroism in Rowling's world. Bravery is not only in duels or defiance, it is in choosing to walk away from love when love becomes a target. Hermione's wand rises, the spell glows, the photographs fade, and with that she becomes the woman who will help defeat Voldemort. In losing her family, she gains the strength to save everyone else. What the books make clear, and what the film only hints at, is that Hermione Granger's greatest magic was not in her intellect, nor in her skill, but in her capacity for sacrifice. She did not erase her parents from memory, she rewrote destiny itself. Her spell was not one of forgetting, but of love so fierce it could survive even in absence. That is the truth hidden between Rowling's lines, the truth the film could not fully show, but the books whispered all along. Number 21, How Fred Weasley Really Died. Fred Weasley's death remains one of the most heartbreaking losses in the entire Harry Potter saga. For many movie fans, his final moment passed almost unnoticed, a brief shot amid the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, with no real explanation or emotional weight. Yet in J.K. Rowling's book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this scene was written with a level of detail and heartbreak that made it unforgettable. The contrast between book and film reveals not only how Fred died, but also why that moment carried such deep emotional meaning, especially for his brother Percy, whose long journey back to his family found its tragic climax in those final seconds. In the film Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, Fred's death is shown almost as an afterthought. The camera moves through the Great Hall, and for a fleeting moment, viewers see the Weasley family gathered around a lifeless body. There is no explanation, no mention of how it happened, no sense of the timing or the sacrifice that took place. For anyone unfamiliar with the books, it feels abrupt, leaving a hole in the emotional rhythm of the story. but in the novel Fred's death occurs in the middle of a vivid and chaotic sequence, one filled with noise, danger, and an overwhelming sense of impending doom. The scene unfolds deep inside Hogwarts in a corridor filled with battle. Percy Weasley, who had spent much of the series estranged from his family, has only just returned. His reconciliation with them is raw, almost awkward, but sincere. The war against Voldemort has stripped away pride and politics, and Percy is finally fighting side by side with his siblings. For the first time in years, he and Fred share laughter again. That small spark of humour, their signature family trait, becomes the last joy they will ever share. Rowling describes the moment with heartbreaking precision. Fred has just cracked a joke about Percy's dramatic resignation from the Ministry of Magic, and the two brothers laugh together amid the battle. Fred looked at Percy with glee, his eyes sparkling. "You actually are joking, Percy, or I don't think I've heard you joke since you were—" The sentence ends abruptly, cut off by the explosion that kills him. The next words hit with the force of the blast itself, and the wall was blown apart and Fred Weasley was killed instantly. The horror of that suddenness gave of a life extinguished mid-laughter makes this one of the most unforgettable deaths in the series. That single line in the book captures both the brutality of war and the fragility of life. Fred dies not in a grand act of heroism, not in a duel or a self-sacrifice, but in a random moment of chaos with no warning. He is gone in an instant, leaving behind an echo of laughter that turns to silence. Rowling's choice to interrupt his speech mid-sentence was deliberate. It creates a literary shock, a physical jolt for the reader, mirroring the emotional blow to his family and friends. The death also carries profound emotional weight because of Percy's presence. Throughout the series, Percy had separated himself from the Weasleys, aligning with the Ministry and dismissing his family's loyalty to Dumbledore. His arrogance had driven a wedge so deep that fans wondered if reconciliation was even possible. When he returns to fight alongside them in the Battle of Hogwarts, it marks one of the series' quiet triumphs, a moment of forgiveness and healing. That Fred's death occurs just as Percy reclaims his place among them transforms the tragedy into something almost unbearable. He loses his brother at the exact moment he finds him again. In the aftermath of the explosion, Rowling writes that Percy clung to Fred's body, shaking him, calling his name, unwilling to believe what had just happened. The image of the once proud Ministry official kneeling over his fallen brother captures the cruel irony of fate. The war that had divided them for so long reunited them only to tear them apart forever. This moment reveals the human cost of the conflict in a way that statistics and battles cannot express. What the movie fails to convey is how deeply this loss affects Percy. In the book, Percy becomes almost possessed by grief. He refuses to leave Fred's body and continues fighting with a kind of desperate fury. Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, and Fred's eyes stared without seeing. This small detail with the unseeing eyes is devastating in its simplicity. It is not a cinematic spectacle. It is human sorrow written plainly. Rowling did not need music or slow motion to make it powerful. The stillness speaks louder than any special effect could. Fred's death also symbolizes the end of innocence for the Weasley family. For years, Fred and George had been the embodiment of lightness and mischief, bringing humor even to the darkest moments. Their jokes had been a kind of armor, a way of resisting fear with laughter. When Fred dies, that laughter dies with him. Even George, his twin and comedic partner, is left broken in a way that words can barely describe. In later passages, we see him unable to speak of Fred without breaking down. The symmetry of the twins, once identical in spirit, is forever destroyed. Rowling's decision to kill Fred rather than George was intentional. Fred had always been the more outspoken and daring of the two. His death leaves George quieter, forced to carry the echo of his brother's voice alone. In literary terms, Fred's death serves as a crucial emotional hinge in the Battle of Hogwarts. It grounds the reader in the cost of victory. While the war against Voldemort is filled with grand stakes, the fate of the wizarding world, the fight between good and evil. Fred's death personalizes that struggle. It reminds readers that behind every spell cast and every victory won, there is loss. It turns the battle from an epic fantasy into a deeply human tragedy. The movie adaptation, however, chose to focus on the broader action of the battle rather than the intimate consequences of it. By skipping over Fred's death scene, the filmmakers inadvertently diluted the emotional gravity of the story. Viewers see the aftermath, the grieving family in the Great Hall, but they are never allowed to feel the moment itself. Without that setup, the pain seems muted, the laughter that turns to silence, the reconciliation that turns to loss. All of that disappears in a single cut. This omission also weakens Percy's arc. His return in the film feels almost symbolic rather than deeply emotional, because the audience never witnesses his shared laughter or his horror when Fred dies. In the book, Percy's breakdown gives meaning to his redemption. In the film, that emotional closure is gone. What could have been one of the most devastating and human moments in the entire story becomes a passing image, one that leaves the viewer wondering what exactly happened. Another aspect that makes Fred's book Death so memorable is its timing. It occurs in the middle of chaos, but it is framed by light, the humor between brothers, the rare joy of reconciliation. This juxtaposition makes the loss even sharper. As readers, we are drawn into that laughter only to have it ripped away. Rowling uses that contrast to remind us that war destroys not only lives, but moments, those small, precious instances of happiness that make life worth living. After the battle, the silence around Fred's body becomes its own kind of monument. There are no speeches, no spells, no resurrection. His death is permanent, ordinary, and final, just as death often is. And yet, through the memory of that last smile, Fred remains one of the most vividly remembered characters in the series. The book gives him that immortality. The film, sadly, does not. Even in the quiet aftermath, when Harry walks through the Great Hall and sees the Weasleys mourning, the weight of Fred's absence presses on every page. The image of Mrs. Weasley bent over her son, of George staring into nothingness, of Percy kneeling beside them, creates a tableau of grief that speaks not only for one family, but for an entire generation. The war has taken many, but this loss feels personal, as if the laughter of Hogwarts itself has gone silent. Fred Weasley's death, as written by J.K. Rowling, is not merely a tragic event. It is a lesson in the cost of love, reconciliation, and courage. It reminds readers that even in the darkest of times, joy can exist, and that the sudden loss of that joy is what makes war truly devastating. The explosion that takes Fred's life shatters not just a wall in Hogwarts, but the very heart of the Weasley family. The film may have captured the chaos of the battle, but only the book captured the soul of that moment. The laughter, the love, and the silence that followed. Number 22, Why Dementors Attacked in the Muggle World. The night in Little Whinging was heavy with summer heat, the kind that hung in the air, long after sunset, pressing against the quiet suburban streets where nothing ever happened, at least nothing magical. But that night, something broke through the invisible barrier that separated the world of wizards from that of ordinary people. When two Dementors appeared in the alley behind Magnolia Crescent, the darkness itself seemed to breathe. Harry Potter and his cousin Dudley Dursley stood alone, one unaware of what was coming, the other suddenly reliving his worst nightmares. What followed looked, even to wizards, like a mystery. Why would Dementors, creatures that guarded Azkaban and obeyed the Ministry, attack a 15-year-old wizard and his Muggle cousin? The film Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix leaves this question hanging in the air, unexplained and unsettling. But in J.K. Rowling's novel, the truth is far more sinister, rooted not in random chaos, but in a deliberate act of political cruelty. In the movie, the Dementor attack is shown almost as an accident, a dark omen meant to push Harry further toward isolation. The camera captures Harry struggling in the rain, his wand lighting the night as Dudley lies helpless on the ground. Then comes the letter from the Ministry, cold and bureaucratic. He is expelled from Hogwarts for using underage magic. It seems as though the Ministry simply doesn't care to listen, doesn't want to hear the truth. Yet the film offers no reason for this indifference, no answer to the question of why. Dementors would appear so far from Azkaban or act without orders. To viewers unfamiliar with the books, it feels like a gap in logic, a plot device to trigger Harry's rebellion. But Rowling's original story paints a much darker picture, one that exposes the poisonous politics within the Ministry itself. In the book, The Order of the Phoenix, the event is not random at all. It is a calculated maneuver orchestrated by none other than Dolores Jane Umbridge, the simpering, pink-clad bureaucrat whose smile hides a venomous ambition. Her role in the Ministry goes beyond regulation and control. She embodies the corruption of authority, cloaked in civility. As the senior undersecretary to the Minister for Magic, she has the power to act covertly, to bend rules and twist facts. Rowling reveals this truth late in the story, when Umbridge, during one of her many fits of self-righteousness, proudly confesses that she was the one who sent the Dementors. Her words are chilling in their simplicity. She did it, she says, to protect the Ministry's interests. But what she truly meant was that she wanted to silence Harry Potter. At this point in the narrative, the wizarding world is in denial about Voldemort's return. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, fears that acknowledging Harry's testimony would mean admitting his own failure to keep the peace. The boy who lived has become the boy who lies. The Ministry, desperate to maintain control, launches a subtle campaign to discredit him. Newspapers like the Daily Prophet fill their pages with ridicule, painting Harry as unstable, attention-seeking, even dangerous. But gossip and propaganda are not enough for Umbridge. Her mind works in the shadows where fear is most effective. By sending Dementors to attack Harry, she intends to force him into a corner. Either he uses magic in a Muggle environment and breaks the law, or he dies under their cold touch. Either way, she wins. The book describes the scene with suffocating detail. A cold, clammy chill spread over Harry's skin. He could see his breath misting in the air, Rowling writes. The Dementors glide closer, their rattling breath drowning the sounds of the Muggle world. Dudley, confused and frightened, becomes a victim of his own worst memories, while Harry, grasping for his wand, summons the only defense he knows. Expecto Patronum! A silver stag bursts. Fourth, scattering the shadows, this act of defiance, of life against death, saves them both, but it also seals Harry's fate. The use of underage magic is immediately detected, and soon a letter from the Ministry arrives with clinical precision. Expulsion, wand confiscation, a disciplinary hearing. The cruelty of it lies in the irony. Harry is punished not for wrongdoing but for survival. When Dumbledore later explains what truly happened, the web of deceit becomes clear. Umbridge, operating under the guise of law and order, used the Dementors as her private weapon. She sent them without authorization, breaking the very laws she claimed to uphold. It was an abuse of power so complete that even the wizarding government preferred to look away. In a quiet, devastating line from the book, Dumbledore tells Harry, "It was not the Ministry who sent the Dementors, it was a person acting without the Ministry's knowledge." But readers later discover that Fudge must have suspected the truth. He allowed Umbridge to continue her persecution because she served his political goals, keeping Harry discredited and Dumbledore contained. The decision to omit this detail from the film changes the story's moral landscape. On screen, the Ministry appears merely misguided, bureaucratic, perhaps indifferent. In the book, it is deeply corrupt, rotten at its core. The difference matters because it reveals Rowling's larger theme, that evil rarely begins with open violence. It starts with small compromises with the people who choose convenience over conscience. Umbridge's act is not an impulsive cruelty. It is a reflection of a government afraid of truth. She manipulates fear as Voldemort manipulates death. Both seek control through terror, and both rely on silence to succeed. Rowling uses this episode to blur the lines between darkness and authority. The Dementors, once symbols of punishment and law, become agents of oppression. Their presence in Little Whinging breaks the illusion that the Muggle world is safe. When Harry faces them, wand trembling, he realizes that the battle against evil is no longer confined to Hogwarts or Azkaban. It is everywhere, even in the quiet streets of his childhood. This realization transforms him from a boy reacting to danger into a young man who begins to understand it. The attack marks the beginning of his loss of innocence. There is also symbolic weight in the choice of victim. Dudley Dursley, the very embodiment of spoiled normalcy, experiences for the first time the despair Harry has known for years. When the Dementor's cold breath touches him, he collapses, overwhelmed by a life without meaning. Later, when he tries to describe what he felt, he says he saw himself the way he really was. For a brief moment, Rowling allows justice to flicker in the darkness. The bullies and the powerful are forced to confront their own emptiness, yet the story does not linger there. The focus shifts to the greater injustice that follows Harry's punishment by the very system that should protect him. Hearing at the Ministry is a masterpiece of political theatre. The room is cold and echoing, lined with witches and wizards whose expressions range from boredom to hostility. The trial is meant to be public humiliation. Fudge interrupts, sneers, dismisses evidence. "You used magic in front of a Muggle," he accuses, ignoring Harry's pleas that it was in self-defense. The irony is bitter. Umbridge herself orchestrated the danger, and now stands ready to condemn him for surviving it. The scene mirrors real-world trials of conscience, where truth is twisted by those in power. Dumbledore's arrival saves Harry, but the damage is done. His trust in the Ministry is shattered forever. By removing this context, the film loses one of the most profound commentaries in Rowling's writing, that corruption can hide behind a smile and a pink cardigan. Dolores Umbridge, with her lace collars and polite cruelty, is far more dangerous than any Death Eater. She does not need dark magic to destroy lives, only paperwork, influence, and the pretense of order. When she confesses to sending the Dementors, it is not remorse but pride that fills her words. To her, she was maintaining discipline. It is the language of every tyrant disguised as a teacher. Harry's experience in Little Whinging becomes a turning point not just for him but for the reader. It teaches that evil can be banal, administrative, even sweet-smelling. The Dementors, physical manifestations of despair, are merely tools. The true villain is the one who commands them. Rowling invites readers to see beyond the surface, to question authority, and to recognize that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not against monsters, but against institutions that create them. In the end, when the truth is revealed, it does not bring comfort. It brings clarity. The attack in Little Whinging was never about Dementors losing control or about Harry's recklessness. It was about power, the abuse of it, the fear that sustains it, and the courage required to stand against it. Rowling's books, unlike the films, never allow easy answers. They remind us that darkness often wears a badge, that truth must sometimes defy the law to survive. And as Harry walks away from the courtroom, no longer the naive boy who once sought justice from authority, the reader understands that the war has already begun. Number 23, How Snape Found Harry in the Forest. When the silver doe appeared in the stillness of the Forest of Dean, gliding across the snow with unearthly light, many viewers of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 felt wonder mixed with confusion. Who had sent this Patronus? How did its mysterious summoner know exactly where Harry Potter and Hermione Granger were hiding, deep in the woods, unseen by all? The film offered no answers. It left the silver light hanging in the darkness, turning the moment into a magical coincidence. But in the book, this scene carries a weight of logic, pain, and loyalty that the movie never showed. The truth of that night lies in the hidden actions of Severus Snape, the man who carried two opposing destinies inside him, and who, guided by Dumbledore's portrait, found the boy he had sworn to protect. In the novel, J.K. Rowling crafts the path to that night with meticulous precision. Snape's presence in the story was not that of an omniscient spy moving at random, but of a man working within the limited and dangerous network left behind by Albus Dumbledore. After Dumbledore's death, a portrait of him was placed in the headmaster's office, just as tradition demanded for all previous headmasters of Hogwarts. That painting, however, was no mere decoration. Within it resided the essence of Dumbledore's mind, still capable of speech, still able to advise those who sought him. When Snape became headmaster, the portrait became his only confidant. Through it, Dumbledore's plan continued, silent and invisible to all but Snape himself. The book explains that Dumbledore's portrait had been following Harry's movements indirectly through the enchanted portraits that hung in other wizarding places. Rowling's world was built on the idea that portraits were not static. They travelled between frames, whispered secrets, and delivered messages. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black, for instance, connected Dumbledore's office with the hidden home of Sirius Black, the Order of the Phoenix's safe house. When Hermione took that portrait with her during their escape, she unknowingly created a link that Dumbledore's portrait could use. Through Phineas Nigellus, who could move. Between his frame at Grimmauld Place and his portrait in Hogwarts, Dumbledore's image in the headmaster's office could learn fragments of Harry's location. In one scene from the book, Hermione, frustrated with the talking portrait, covers it with a bag to keep it from revealing their secrets. Yet even this act cannot fully block its observations. At one point, Phineas Nigellus overhears Hermione mention the Forest of Dean. This was the moment the trail formed. Dumbledore's portrait, hearing the location through this chain of portraits, relayed it to Snape. The information was vague. It gave no precise coordinates, only the name of the forest. But for Snape, that was enough. He was a master of magic and concealment. The woods, blanketed in snow, were vast and silent, but he knew the importance of that place and understood that fate had drawn Harry there for a reason. Snape's task was far from simple. As a double agent under Voldemort's reign, every movement he made risked exposure. The Carrows, two of Voldemort's followers, monitored his actions at Hogwarts. Any absence could have raised suspicion. And yet, knowing that Harry was lost, weaponless and despairing, Snape risked everything. The sword of Godric Gryffindor, which had been hidden within Dumbledore's office, was meant for Harry. It could destroy Horcruxes, the dark fragments of Voldemort's soul. Dumbledore's portrait had instructed Snape to give the sword to Harry at the right moment. That moment had come. To deliver it, Snape needed a way that would not expose him. He could not simply walk into the forest and hand over the sword. Harry would not trust him, and any contact could doom them both. The only way was through magic, silent, symbolic, and pure. Snape's Patronus had long been the shape of a doe, the same as Lily Potter's. This Patronus was his confession of love, his eternal link to the woman he had lost. Sending it into the forest was not only a magical act, but also a deeply personal one. It was Snape's heart reaching out to protect Lily's son, as he had promised Dumbledore he would. In the film, the silver doe appears without explanation. It glides through the snow, leading Harry to the frozen pond where the sword lies. The viewer sees a miracle without cause, a mystery without logic. But in the book, the magic gains meaning. Snape's Patronus appears because he is nearby, hidden behind the trees, unseen but watching. A silver doe, Rowling writes, it glided soundlessly over the place where Harry and Hermione slept. That moment is Snape's silent redemption. He cannot reveal himself, but he ensures that Harry receives the sword that will help him fulfill his destiny. The decision to omit this explanation in the film robs the scene of one of its most powerful layers. Without knowing that the Patronus came from Snape, guided by Dumbledore's portrait, the audience misses the complexity of his loyalty. The film reduces the act to magic without motive. In contrast, the book gives us a chain of sacrifice: Dumbledore's foresight, the enchanted portraits, Snape's courage, and finally the doe's appearance in the snow. Every link in that chain exists because of love and duty, not coincidence. Later, when Harry views Snape's memories in the Pensieve, this same event gains even deeper resonance. We learn that Snape's love for Lily Potter never faded, that it was the force behind all his choices. After all this time, Dumbledore asks him in one of the most famous moments of the series. Always, Snape replies. This single word redefines every action he ever took. The Patronus in the forest was not a random act of guidance. It was a message written in light. It was the continuation of that always, the proof that even in secrecy, Snape remained true to his promise. Rowling also adds a sense of tragic irony to the episode. Snape, who had once despised James Potter, must now save James's son. He must do it in the shadows, knowing Harry will never thank him, never understand. Yet Snape never hesitates. In the book, his mission is clear: ensure that Harry survives long enough to face his destiny. He delivers the sword and disappears, leaving no trace of himself. The silver doe vanishes into the darkness, just as Snape will vanish from the world, his heroism misunderstood until the very end. The artistic brilliance of Rowling's narrative lies in how she connects this moment with the theme of perception. Throughout the series, Harry and the readers judge Snape by appearances. He is bitter, cruel, and secretive. The film, by omitting his reasoning, reinforces that image. But the book breaks it apart. In that small act, a Patronus sent through the night, we see the full contradiction of Severus Snape. He is the Death Eater who defies Voldemort, the man of shadows who performs an act of light, the cynic who loves with absolute devotion. The Forest of Dean scene, when read with this knowledge, transforms from a puzzle into poetry. The cold air, the glimmer of the Patronus, the reflection of the sword beneath the ice, all become symbols of purity and redemption. The doe, representing Lily, leads Harry to what he needs most, as if Snape himself were offering the strength he never found for himself. Rowling describes the moment with quiet beauty. Something silver-white, something enormous, erupted from his wand. This is not just magic, it is memory made visible, love turned into protection. Even the physical placement of the sword, lying beneath the ice, mirrors Snape's own soul. Buried, concealed, but still gleaming with purpose. Harry must dive into the freezing water to claim it, just as he must later dive into Snape's memories to discover the truth. The sword's retrieval is the external act that foreshadows the internal revelation to come. Without Snape's hidden help, Harry's quest would have ended there, in the forest, frozen and defeated. Instead, he rises from the water holding Gryffindor's sword, a weapon passed to him not by luck, but by the courage of a man he believed to be his enemy. The clarity found in the book gives this scene the gravity it deserves. It connects the threads of magic, emotion, and destiny that define the entire saga. It shows that Snape's knowledge of Harry's location was not supernatural intuition, but the result of quiet, dangerous cooperation between him and Dumbledore's portrait. "You must give him the sword," the portrait had instructed. "He will have need of it soon." Snape obeyed without hesitation, knowing that even this small act could cost him his life. When readers reach the end of the story, they see how every secret piece fits together. The silver doe, the portrait, the sword, all merge into one truth. Snape was never acting randomly. His loyalty to Lily and Dumbledore guided him with unwavering precision. The films gave us the image of the doe, the books gave us its soul. That difference, though invisible on the screen, is what turns a magical coincidence into a masterpiece of moral complexity. Snape's silent journey through the Forest of Dean stands as one of the clearest examples of how Rowling's world thrives in the space between seen and unseen, where love, sacrifice, and purpose burn brighter than any silver light. Number 24. Why Hermione fought for elf rights. When Hermione Granger appeared on screen in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, moviegoers saw a bright, passionate and loyal friend who faced dragons, danced awkwardly at the Yule Ball, and helped Harry survive the Triwizard Tournament. Yet, one of the most significant turning points in her moral and emotional growth, her awakening to social injustice within the wizarding world, was completely left out. In J.K. Rowling's novel, Hermione's discovery of the plight of house elves is not a side note, but a defining moment that reveals her deep sense of justice and empathy. It is here, in the dusty kitchens of Hogwarts and through the story of a frightened house elf named Winky, that Hermione becomes more than just a brilliant student. She becomes an activist. The books depict this transformation vividly. After the Quidditch World Cup, when the house elf Winky is unjustly dismissed by her master Barty Crouch Sr. for being found with a wand, Hermione is appalled by how everyone else reacts. Ron laughs off her indignation, and even Harry seems unsure why she's so upset. In the 4th chapter, Rowling writes, "Hermione looked furious. How can you laugh about that? She didn't do anything. It's sickening, the way they treat them." This moment plants the seed of a new kind of rebellion within her, not against dark wizards or bullies at school, but against the indifference of an entire society built upon quiet exploitation. Hermione's outrage deepens when she learns that Hogwarts itself runs on the unpaid labor of house elves. When she visits the kitchens for the first time, a warm, cheerful place filled with the sounds of cooking and dozens of elves bustling about, she expects to find suffering and resentment. Instead, she finds cheerful obedience. Dobby, the free elf, greets her with joy, but most of the others recoil from her attempts to free them. The text describes how she stands frozen, dishcloth in hand, realizing the magnitude of the problem. The injustice, she understands, isn't only in the enslavement itself, but in how completely the victims have accepted it as normal. From that moment, Hermione cannot ignore what she has seen. In one of the most memorable acts of teenage determination in the series, she founds SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. Rowling's description of its founding is deliberately humorous and idealistic. Hermione designs badges, drafts pamphlets, and tries to recruit Harry and Ron, who reluctantly join. Yet behind the satire lies something profound. Hermione becomes a symbol of youthful activism. Earnest, unpolished, and stubbornly principled, she collects membership dues, writes letters to the ministry, and even knits clothes to leave around the Gryffindor common room, hoping the elves will take them and thus gain their freedom. Most refuse, horrified at the very idea. Her activism, met with ridicule and failure, becomes a quiet reflection of real-world reformers who struggle against systemic injustice and apathy. Rowling uses Hermione's efforts not to mock her, but to explore how difficult social change can be, especially when the oppressed have internalized their chains. "They like being enslaved," Ron says, exasperated, echoing the prevailing wizard opinion. But Hermione refuses to accept this logic. She sees what others will not, that comfort and contentment can be the masks of oppression. This insistence on seeing beyond appearances reveals a maturity and moral courage that set her apart. Her activism becomes an early echo of the resistance that will define her role in later books, fighting for Muggle-born rights, opposing the ministry, and eventually standing against Voldemort's regime. What makes this subplot so essential is how it mirrors broader themes in Harry Potter. The wizarding world, though magical, is rife with prejudice against Muggle-borns, werewolves, giants, and house elves alike. By giving Hermione this storyline, Rowling turns her into the conscience of the narrative. While Harry fights external evil, Hermione confronts the quiet injustices hidden in plain sight. In the Hogwarts kitchens, her compassion meets the weight of tradition. Her logic meets the irrational comfort of the status quo. Her failure to free even one elf becomes symbolic, not of futility, but of the long, painful process of enlightenment. The house elf subplot also exposes how morality operates in shades of grey. Dobby, once freed by Harry, remains loyal, but chooses to work for wages, a radical act among his kind. Meanwhile, Winky, dismissed and free, falls into depression and alcoholism, unable to bear her loss of servitude. Hermione's heart breaks for Winky, but she cannot understand how freedom could feel like punishment. This clash between idealism and lived experience becomes one of the novel's most nuanced lessons. Rowling writes, "Winky was crying into her skirt. Winky is a disgraced elf. Winky is not liking being free." Through Winky's suffering, Hermione and readers confront the painful truth that liberation cannot simply be given, it must be desired and understood. This narrative complexity, absent from the films, gives Hermione's character emotional depth. On screen, she appears primarily as the voice of reason, the clever witch who solves puzzles and supports Harry. In the books, she wrestles with questions of ethics, empathy, and the limits of her own understanding. Her campaign for house elf rights, though mocked by her friends, shows her willingness to stand alone for what she believes is right. It foreshadows her later courage in defying authority, from Dolores Umbridge to Voldemort himself. The Hermione who knits socks for elves is the same Hermione who will later erase her parents' memories to protect them. Both acts spring from the same moral root, the belief that compassion demands action even when it hurts. There is a particular tenderness in how Rowling portrays Hermione's persistence. When the others tease her about SPEW, she refuses to yield. Her notebooks fill with plans, her hands are covered in yarn and ink. Each failure only hardens her resolve. It's about trying, she insists. If nobody tries to change things, nothing ever will. In this single line lies the essence of her transformation, a shift from mere outrage to moral responsibility. The Elf-Right subplot thus becomes a training ground for Hermione's conscience, teaching her that change begins with discomfort and often ends in misunderstanding. By removing this storyline, the films unintentionally flattened Hermione's character arc. Viewers saw her brilliance, bravery, and friendship, but missed the fierce idealism that defined her. Without SPEW, her moral compass appears innate rather than hard-won. The movie Hermione is clever, the book Hermione is compassionate, to the point of pain. The difference is profound. Her activism adds layers to her intelligence. It transforms intellect into empathy. She is not only solving riddles in the library, but grappling with the world's moral contradictions. The SPEW subplot also adds texture to Hogwarts itself, revealing the hidden labor that sustains the school's magic. Every feast, every spotless dormitory, every polished goblet exists because of unseen hands. When Hermione brings this to light, readers experience a jolt of awareness. The magical world, once so wondrous, suddenly feels disturbingly familiar, built upon hierarchies, traditions, and silence. The elves' invisibility mirrors how real-world societies often ignore the suffering behind comfort and privilege. Rowling's choice to let Hermione see what others refuse to see turns her into the moral mirror of the reader. Even Dumbledore's response adds complexity. He respects Hermione's passion but remains pragmatic, suggesting that change must come slowly. His quiet tolerance contrasts with the laughter of others, but also exposes the limitations of even the wisest authority. Hermione's youthful absolutism challenges him, and through her, Rowling critiques the complacency of the powerful. The young witch, still learning, becomes a catalyst for ethical reflection across generations. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of Hermione's activism is that it fails, and yet it matters deeply. By the end of Goblet of Fire, no elves have joined SPEW, no laws have changed, and her friends are still rolling their eyes. But Hermione herself has changed irrevocably. She has seen the machinery of injustice and chosen to resist it, however small her voice may be. In doing so, she grows from a student of books into a student of humanity. The failure of her campaign becomes the foundation of her future strength. The same persistence that drives her to defend the voiceless will later help her survive torture in Malfoy Manor and rebuild the world after Voldemort's fall. The omission of this storyline in the films not only diminishes Hermione's character, but also erases one of Rowling's boldest commentaries on moral growth. The elf rights subplot turns the magical world from a backdrop of wonder into a mirror of our own flawed societies. It reminds readers that even in a world of spells and potions, injustice can hide in plain sight, and that true heroism lies not only in defeating dark lords, but in seeing the invisible and caring enough to act. Hermione's SPEW may have been laughed at by her peers, but in the moral architecture of Harry Potter, it stands as one of the purest expressions of courage. In the quiet corners of Hogwarts, among steaming cauldrons and fluttering parchment, Hermione's idealism burns brighter than any spell. The girl who once cried over an elf's dismissal will one day rewrite laws, stand beside Harry and Ron in battle, and carry her compassion into every fight she faces. Her activism was never about socks or slogans. It was about awakening her own and ours. Number 25. Who the Marauders were and how the map was made. When Fred and George Weasley first handed the Marauders map to Harry Potter in The Prisoner of Azkaban, it seemed like another whimsical Hogwarts object, one more enchanted artifact in a world already brimming with magic. Yet, behind this worn piece of parchment lay a story that was never fully told in the film. The movie presents the map as a curiosity, a clever joke from the twins. But in J.K. Rowling's book, it holds layers of friendship, loyalty, and tragedy that tie directly to Harry's father and his closest friends. The Marauders map is not merely a magical GPS for mischief makers. It is a silent witness to a brotherhood that began in the shadowed corridors of Hogwarts and ended in betrayal and death. Long before Harry ever walked through the castle doors, 4 boys, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, found each other at Hogwarts. They were not ordinary students. James was brilliant, daring, and sometimes arrogant. Sirius was rebellious and fiercely loyal. Pettigrew was timid, often seeking protection from the stronger boys. And then there was Remus, quiet, gentle, and burdened by a terrible secret. Remus Lupin was a werewolf. Each month, when the full moon rose, he would transform into a creature of uncontrollable ferocity. The world of wizards was cruel to werewolves. Even as a child, Remus lived in fear of rejection. But Albus Dumbledore saw more in him than his curse and allowed him to attend Hogwarts under strict precautions. The Whomping Willow and the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade were designed specifically to contain his transformations, hidden from other students. The friendship between the 4 deepened as the years went on. James and Sirius, both from proud wizarding families, could have easily treated Remus's condition with disgust or pity. Instead, they responded with ingenuity and affection. They wanted to be with their friend during his transformations, no matter how dangerous it was. To achieve that, they began to study a branch of magic that was far beyond the reach of most adult wizards, becoming animagi. It was a reckless idea, but they succeeded. James learned to transform into a stag, earning the nickname Prongs. Sirius became a great black dog, Padfoot. Pettigrew, to everyone's surprise, managed to turn into a rat, Wormtail, and Remus, whose transformations had once been a lonely nightmare, became Moony. Their new forms allowed them to accompany him on nights of the full moon. "They helped me," Lupin once admitted in the book, his voice filled with emotion. "They became animagi to keep me company when I transformed." Those words reveal the depth of their bond. In their animal shapes, they roamed the grounds freely, creating secret passages, discovering hidden rooms, and memorizing every twist of Hogwarts' labyrinthine corridors. It was during those midnight adventures that the idea for the Marauders map was born, a living blueprint of Hogwarts that would record the movement of every person inside its walls. Creating such a map was an act of magical genius. It combined advanced enchantments, complex surveillance charms, and something even more personal, a shared sense of humor. On the surface of the parchment, written in elegant, mischievous ink, appeared the line, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Only when the map's owner spoke those words did its hidden drawings come to life, revealing the castle's layout and the footprints of every student, professor, and ghost. When finished, It could also be erased with a single phrase. Mischief managed, or the map was signed by its creators, Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs, names that meant little to anyone else but everything to them. In the book, Lupin later confesses to Harry that he instantly recognized the map when Snape showed it to him. "Of course I know it," he said. "I helped write it." The films omit this essential revelation, depriving the audience of the emotional gravity behind that moment. The professor's familiarity with the map is not casual knowledge. It is memory. To Lupin, the map was not just an object. It was a fragment of his youth, a symbol of the friends he had lost. When he held it again in Harry's third year, it was as if he was holding a piece of James and Sirius from the days before darkness divided them. For the Marauders, the map was an act of rebellion and love intertwined. It was a way to outwit the rules of the castle, to sneak into Hogsmeade unseen, to laugh in the face of authority. But it was also born from compassion, from a desire to help their friend bear the unbearable. Every secret passage they marked, every spell they wove, came from nights spent ensuring that Remus's transformations caused no harm. They crafted the map not only to aid their mischief, but to safeguard their bond. The film, in skipping this context, presents it as a toy. The book shows it as an artifact of friendship. The irony, of course, is that the same map later became a silent witness to betrayal. Peter Pettigrew, once their companion, sold James and Lily Potter to Voldemort. In doing so, he shattered the circle of the Marauders forever. When Harry first uses the map in his third year, the map reveals a name that should have been impossible: Peter Pettigrew. The moment is chilling because the parchment, created in innocence, exposes the treachery that destroyed Harry's family. In this way, the map becomes almost symbolic, a bridge between generations, carrying the laughter of the past and the pain that followed. In the book, Harry's reaction to discovering who the Marauders were is one of awe and sorrow. He realizes that the prankish signatures at the bottom of the parchment belong to his father and his father's friends. "My dad, and Sirius, and Pettigrew, and Lupin," he whispers in disbelief. The knowledge transforms the map from a mischievous tool into a sacred relic. For the first time, Harry feels the living presence of his father, not as a distant legend, but as a boy like himself. Clever, impulsive, and full of courage. It's a moment of emotional inheritance, something the movie only hints at but never fully gives voice to. The Marauders map also serves as a moral compass of sorts, reflecting how the same magic can be used for good or ill. Fred and George use it for laughter and adventure. Harry uses it to uncover truth and save lives. Snape, however, views it as dangerous, and with good reason. It exposes secrets that many wish to keep hidden. When he confiscates it, the map mocks him with cruel humour, calling him an ugly git. This insult, though funny, is a bitter echo of James Potter's bullying days. The map's voice still carries the arrogance of its creators, frozen in ink, unaware of the pain those words once caused. It is a perfect metaphor for the complexity of memory, part joy, part wound. Lupin's relationship with the map in the book adds a haunting depth. When he takes it from Harry, he doesn't see mischief. He sees ghosts. Each line on the parchment, each secret tunnel, is a trace of nights when he was not alone in his suffering. For a man who had spent his adult life in guilt and solitude, the map is both comfort and torment. He knows what became of each marauder: James dead, Sirius imprisoned, Peter a traitor. To hold their creation again is to open an old wound. That emotional dimension is what the film misses entirely, among the quiet grief of remembrance. The act of creating the map also reveals the brilliance of these young wizards. They were not merely pranksters, but innovators. To design a magical artifact capable of tracking hundreds of moving figures across an enchanted castle is a feat few adults could replicate. The Marauders' ingenuity foreshadows their later significance in the larger war. James and Sirius as soldiers of the Order of the Phoenix, Remus as a protector and teacher, and even Peter as the weak link whose betrayal would shape destiny. The map is their shared legacy, born of their brightest days before the darkness fell. What makes this story particularly powerful is how it redefines the idea of inheritance. The Marauder's map is not a treasure left behind in gold or glory, but a piece of living memory. Harry inherits his father's mischief, but also his heart. Each time he whispers, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," he unknowingly echoes his father's laughter. Each time he closes it with "mischief managed," he repeats the quiet pride of young men who believed friendship could outlast fear. The book makes this connection explicit, turning the map into an emotional thread between father and son. Snape's understanding of the map, too, gains weight in the literary version. He knows its origin, and it burns him. The Marauders had humiliated him during their school years, and every trace of their magic reminds him of his resentment, and of Lily, the girl he loved who chose James instead. When he sees Harry with the map, it's as if the ghosts of his youth mock him again. His fury in that moment is not just anger at rule-breaking, it's the anguish of a man who can't escape the past. That psychological nuance, lost in the film's brevity, underscores how the map is a relic of both friendship and cruelty. Even in the book's later chapters, the Marauder's map continues to play a subtle role. It helps Harry evade danger, uncover secrets, and eventually discover Peter Pettigrew's true fate. It is both tool and storyteller, a silent narrator chronicling the footsteps of those who carry the burden of the past. Its existence reminds readers that magic in Rowling's world is never neutral. It reflects the hearts of those who create it. The Marauders poured laughter, courage, and love into the map, and those qualities endure long after their laughter is gone. Thus, what the movie presents as a fleeting magical object is in truth one of the most emotionally charged artifacts in the Harry Potter universe. Behind the ink and enchantment lies the story of 4 boys who refused to abandon one of their own, who turned pain into adventure and friendship into immortality. In the quiet lines of the Marauder's map lives the memory of Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, a testament that even mischief, when born from love, can leave a legacy more powerful than magic itself. Number 26. Why the Dursley home was protected. When fans of the Harry Potter films recall number 4, Privet Drive, they usually remember a gloomy suburban home, its perfectly trimmed lawn, and the Dursleys' constant complaints about their abnormal nephew. Yet few realize that behind those beige curtains and locked cupboards lay one of the most powerful protective enchantments in the entire wizarding world. The movies mention briefly that the house is under protection, but they never fully explore why Voldemort and his Death Eaters could not touch Harry there for so many years. To understand that, one must return to the very heart of the books, where J.K. Rowling reveals that the safety surrounding Privet Drive was born not from ordinary spells, but from the most ancient and selfless kind of magic, a mother's love. When Lily Potter died, shielding her infant son, she triggered an ancient charm that not even Voldemort, in all his arrogance, could comprehend. It was a protection that did not come from wands or incantations, but from sacrifice. Dumbledore, ever the scholar of such mysteries, understood this immediately. He knew that Voldemort's killing curse, cast with hatred, had rebounded because Lily's act of love had bound Harry with a force older and deeper than any spell, but such magic needed a vessel, a living anchor that would preserve it. That is why Dumbledore left baby Harry on the doorstep of his Aunt Petunia, the only remaining blood relative of Lily Evans. As long as Harry could call the house where his mother's blood lived home, he would remain untouchable to Voldemort's power. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, this enchantment is briefly mentioned when members of the Order arrive to escort Harry from Privet Drive. They speak of protections and enchantments that shield him from detection. Yet the films glide over the deeper reason. In the books, Dumbledore explains it with haunting precision. "Your mother's sacrifice made the bond of blood the strongest shield I could give you," he tells Harry. "While you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort." The simplicity of the explanation hides the extraordinary complexity of the magic. It was not Dumbledore's spell that protected Harry, it was Lily's love extended through her sister. The irony is impossible to ignore. Petunia Dursley, who despised the world her sister belonged to, became the unwilling guardian of the very magic she had spent her life denying. She might have shut the door on owls, torn up Hogwarts letters and complained about freakishness, but through her, the bloodline that carried Lily's love continued to protect Harry. Every insult she hurled, every chore she forced upon him, could not erase the fact that by allowing him to live under her roof, she kept him alive in a much deeper sense. Privet Drive, for all its sterility, became the only place Voldemort could not penetrate. The book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows provides a poignant moment that illuminates this connection. When the time comes for Harry to leave the Dursleys' home for good, Dumbledore's enchantment is about to break. The protection lasts only until he comes of age, 17 in the wizarding world. As the Order of the Phoenix prepares to transport him to safety, even Petunia's cold heart shows a flicker of understanding. She pauses before leaving the house and says, "You didn't just lose a mother that night in Godric's Hollow, I lost a sister." For the first time, the woman who had been a symbol of mundane cruelty acknowledges the bond that had defined the very magic surrounding them. Her house had been a sanctuary built on that lost sisterhood. The protection worked in ways few wizards could fully grasp. The enchantment was woven into the house itself, making it impossible for Voldemort to touch Harry as long as he resided there. Even when the Ministry of Magic fell and Death Eaters gained control of much of the wizarding world, Privet Drive remained a blind spot. Spells to locate Harry failed. Dark magic that could sense life signatures simply dissolved at its threshold. This wasn't a barrier like the Fidelius charm that hid the Potter's cottage in Godric's Hollow. It was something older, primal, unbreakable by intent. Voldemort, in all his studies of dark magic, had never understood that love could act as protection. His inability to fathom such a concept became his greatest weakness. Rowling's description of this enchantment turns Privet Drive into a paradoxical symbol. The same walls that witnessed Harry's mistreatment also shielded him from annihilation. Each morning, when Aunt Petunia demanded he weed the garden, she unknowingly maintained the ancient spell. Each night he slept in his small room under the stairs. That room became a fortress, guarded not by magic wands, but by the memory of a woman's final act of love. The ordinary world of Muggle suburbia, its grey streets and garden gnomes, was unknowingly infused with the most extraordinary of protections. The scene in Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore sends a howler to Petunia, is one of the most revealing moments in the entire series. In the letter, only one chilling sentence is heard: "Remember my last Petunia." The line refers to Dumbledore's letter left with baby Harry years before, explaining why she must take him in. Petunia's reaction, a trembling silence followed by obedience, shows that she understood perfectly what was at stake. Though she loathed everything connected to magic, she respected Dumbledore's authority and the mysterious obligation she had accepted. That single letter had bound her, and through her the spell endured. When Harry turned 17, the protection finally faded. Dumbledore had warned him of this, explaining that the spell will break when you come of age. The day before his birthday, members of the Order came to extract him, knowing that once the clock struck midnight, Voldemort would be free to attack. The cinematic version captures the tension of this moment, but only the book explains its deeper meaning. Harry's departure was not merely a tactical relocation, it was the end of the only home where his mother's sacrifice still lived. As he stepped outside, the invisible walls of love that had shielded him for 16 years dissolved like mist in sunlight. The magic of blood protection is one of Rowling's most profound inventions. It blurs the line between the emotional and the supernatural. In a world dominated by wands, spells, and curses, this ancient enchantment proves that the greatest defense against evil is not power, but compassion. Dumbledore, in his wisdom, built the Order of the Phoenix around this very idea. His strategy against Voldemort relied not just on force, but on human connections, loyalty, friendship, and love. The protection of Privet Drive was the earliest and most enduring embodiment of that principle. Even after the protection ended, its moral significance lingered. The house that had once confined Harry also symbolized his resilience. Growing up unloved, he still carried the strength of the love that had saved him. In the films, this duality is barely touched upon, but in the books, it becomes a recurring theme. Dumbledore reminds Harry that the ability to love is what sets him apart from Voldemort. "Do not pity the dead, Harry," he says later. "Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." It is as if the years at Privet Drive were an unspoken lesson. Even in the most loveless environment, love's protection endures invisibly. The Dursleys themselves were transformed by the experience, though subtly. Vernon never understood and never wanted to. But Dudley, in Deathly Hallows, reveals the quiet impact of those years. As he shakes Harry's hand before leaving, he says, "I don't think you're a waste of space." It's a simple line, yet it signifies that even in a home built on denial, goodness found a way to survive. The same magic that kept Voldemort out had, in a gentler form, worked its way into the Dursley household, cracking the armor of prejudice and fear. In the cinematic world, these nuances are largely lost. The films must move briskly, showing flashes of the Order of the Phoenix's protection, the safe house protocols, and the magical tracking systems. But the audience is left to wonder, why was this ordinary suburban house so crucial? The novels answer that with elegant precision. It was not Dumbledore's brilliance or the Ministry's enchantments that protected Harry. It was the simplest truth in all of magic: love leaves a mark that evil cannot touch. This truth also explains why Voldemort could not simply wait until Harry visited the Wizarding World during the summer. Each time Harry returned to Privet Drive, even briefly, the protection renewed itself. The act of calling that house home, no matter how unwillingly, reaffirmed the blood magic. As long as he considered it a place he belonged to, however grudgingly, the protection held. The moment he no longer called it home, it would fade. That delicate balance gave Harry's summers a hidden weight, transforming the monotony of Muggle life into a quiet war between light and darkness. Thus, the reason Voldemort could not strike Harry at the Dursleys' house is not because Dumbledore's order cast superior defensive spells or kept constant watch, though both played their part. The true defense was invisible, unbreakable, and utterly beyond Voldemort's comprehension. It was the magic born of sacrifice and sealed by blood. A mother's final act had extended through her sister, through walls of an ordinary home, through years of neglect, and had carried Harry safely to the moment he could stand on his own. The house on Privet Drive, dull and loveless on the surface, was in truth the holiest sanctuary of all. Number 27, Why Snape's Memories Changed Everything. When Severus Snape collapsed in the shrieking shack, whispering to Harry to take his tears, the scene in Deathly Hallows. Part 2 was already heavy with mystery and dread, but for many film viewers the following revelation, at the moment when Harry poured Snape's memories into the pensieve, seemed to transform him instantly, almost abruptly, from hatred to reverence. The movie gives us brief flashes. Lily's green eyes, Snape's anguish, Dumbledore's quiet commands. Yet the emotional gravity that J.K. Rowling poured into those pages of the book, the slow unravelling of a man's lifelong guilt and love, carries a far deeper meaning than the cinematic version allows. The reason Harry named his son Albus Severus Potter was not a symbolic act born of pity, but an acknowledgement of a truth that changed his entire understanding of good and evil, of loyalty and love. In the book, the chapter The Prince's Tale opens with Harry trembling beside Dumbledore's pensieve, tipping the silvery strands of memory inside. What unfolds before him is not just a series of revelations, it is an emotional biography of a man he never truly knew. The boy who had despised Snape for years is suddenly forced to walk through his teacher's memories, to witness his entire life without the mask of sarcasm or cruelty. The book gives time for Harry and for readers to absorb every devastating layer of it. It begins in the quiet backyard of a small Muggle street where a young, thin boy watches a red-haired girl swing from the branches of a tree. "You're a witch," says the young Severus, eyes wide with awe. For the first time, Harry sees that Snape's connection to his mother, Lily Evans, goes back long before Hogwarts. That childhood friendship, tender, fragile, and sincere, reveals a different Snape, one capable of love and innocence. The film condenses this tenderness into fleeting glimpses, but the book lingers. Rowling describes Snape's fascination with Lily's kindness, her courage, and her magic. He was the first to see her potential and the first to promise her that she was special. Yet as their lives diverged, Lily into Gryffindor, Snape into Slytherin, the world around them hardened, forcing choices that would haunt them both. Harry learns that Snape's bitterness, his cruelty in the classroom, even his obsession with house rivalries were all born from the same wound, the loss of the only person he had ever loved. The book does not shy away from showing Snape's darkest moments. It allows readers to understand his shame. When Lily turns away from him after he calls her a mudblood, the slur echoes like a curse through his memories. Rowling writes, or he wanted to call himself back, to unsay it, but the word seemed to hang in the air between them. That single word becomes a lifelong scar. Snape's fascination with the dark arts, the path that led him to Voldemort, was not born of pure malice, but of insecurity and despair, a desperate need to belong to something powerful after losing Lily's affection. And when he later delivers the prophecy to Voldemort, unknowingly condemning Lily to death, his horror is total. The book paints the scene not as a plot twist, but as the shattering of a soul. Harry sees Snape fall to his knees before Dumbledore, begging for Lily's life. He does not plead for James or the baby, only for her. "Hide her! Hide them all, then!" Dumbledore replies coldly, testing the limits of Snape's remorse, and in that instant, Snape's transformation begins. He becomes a man enslaved by his guilt and his love, agreeing to protect the child of the woman he could not save. The film briefly captures this with the famous line, "always," but in the book the word carries the weight of a lifetime. Snape's always is not just an expression of devotion. It is an unending confession. His love for Lily became his punishment and his redemption, his reason to live and the source of his suffering.